Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the only installment for spring, which feels kind of weird, but this is our spring installment in our How to Get Hired webinar series. Today, we are joined by Stacey of Enterprise Holdings, and she will be sharing her tips and tricks in preparation for next week's spring job and internship fair. So just an overview, Stacey will be giving her presentation on her tips and tricks of the hiring process in the virtual environment, and we will follow up with a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for Stacey at any point, then you can just type it into the Q&A box, and once we get to the Q&A portion of the webinar, we will just get right into it. So this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to the Career Success YouTube channel within a couple of days of the event. So if you were registered for this event, you will be notified of it. But if not, you can also just find our YouTube page on our website. So yeah, thank you again. I'll pass it off to Stacey. But yeah, thank you all again for joining us.
All right, can you guys see the presentation okay?
Yeah, we can see it. You might want to change the display settings again to swap the view.
Okay, give me 1 second.
No worries, you're good.
Go from beginning.
Yep, and you're golden. You're all good to go.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, McKenna, for having me today. I guess I'll go ahead and start with a quick introduction. My name is Stacey Caceres, and I am the Talent Acquisition Manager with Enterprise Holdings. I've been with Enterprise now for a little over 15.5 years. I actually started in our management trainee program right after graduating from San Francisco State. I worked my way up to assistant manager after about 10 months, and then became a branch manager overseeing a multi-million-dollar operation right before I hit 2 years with the company. I was a manager for a couple years. I ran a couple stores along the peninsula in downtown San Francisco. And then a little over 6 years ago, I got promoted into talent acquisition. So in my role now, I am responsible for all of the hiring for our locations in the South Bay, the San Jose Airport, Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, and our 2 locations in Fremont. And I'm one of 4 talent acquisition professionals here in the Bay Area. You know, in the 6 years that I've been recruiting, I've seen quite a few resumes, and I've conducted many interviews. So really excited to be here today to share strategies on, you know, successful interviewing so that you can get hired at your dream job. Okay, so first just wanted to go through the agenda for today. You know, we're obviously going to talk about, you know, how to best prepare for an interview. Getting a job starts before you meet with a hiring manager or recruiter. So I'll be sharing some important things you'll need to do beforehand to help increase your chances of landing your dream job. I'm also going to share some tips on how to stand out during virtual interviews, as well as how to close the interview so that you're leaving that lasting impression on the hiring manager or interviewer. And then we'll share some information on our company, as well as the opportunities that we have available. And then, as McKenna said, we'll have some time for Q&A in the end on anything that I discussed today. So even though companies now are using, you know, virtual platforms to conduct interviews such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, the list goes on, it's still going to be really important to prepare as if you're going in for an in-person interview. So a couple key points we're going to talk about when it comes to preparation for the interview is, having that professional image, knowing the company, making sure that you do research ahead of time, and also knowing yourself, by doing a self-assessment, identifying what your strengths and weaknesses are so you're able to, talk about that in an interview. So when it comes to having a professional image for the interview, first thing you need to think about is, having professional attire, which is a full suit, nice blouse with a skirt or dress. Having that neat and organized appearance is going to go a long way in making that great first impression. You want to make sure that your clothes are clean and pressed. I've interviewed candidates with wrinkled tops and wrinkled suit jackets, and I can tell you that it's really not a good look. When it comes to your hair, don't try to make a statement with it, and you should do okay there. Neat, clean, and conservatively styled are really all that you need to remember. And then no matter who you're interviewing with, dressing professionally is really going to be the best bet, even if you think it might not be necessary, because it makes that professional statement, even if the person that's interviewing you is dressed casually. Other thing you want to be careful about, is clothing that might be too trendy, and having visible tattoos and visible piercings. I know that there are companies out there that can allow their employees to have visible tattoos and piercings in the workplace, but here at Enterprise, the workplace is very conservative. If you're going to be interviewing with companies and you're not sure about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable when it comes to the dress code, reach out to the recruiter. And if they don't get back to you, again, it's better to be dressed professionally and cover up any of those visible tattoos or piercings, at least for that first round of interviews, okay? So the more you prepare for an interview, obviously the easier it's going to be. If you know what you're talking about, whether it's the company or whether it's yourself, you're going to be more confident and hopefully less nervous. It's also going to help raise your level of enthusiasm, which is just as important. And getting to know the company you're interviewing with means that you're going to have to dig in a little. Researching the history and industry is going to help you better understand what that company is looking for in a potential employee. And there's a ton of resources available to you for your research. There's a career center at school, the internet, LinkedIn, and maybe a network of friends that have already graduated to the work world. You'll want to use as many resources as possible to gain a full understanding of that company. You also want to look for things in that company that's going to be important to you, right? So think about, the work environment, the training programs, the culture, the growth opportunities, and philosophy for promotions among the things that you look for in your research. And most importantly, you're going to want to review the job description for the position that you're interviewing for so that you can tailor your resume to that role. Keep your resume to one page and make sure that all of your experience is relevant to the role that you're going to be applying to, okay? So not only is it important to, know the company well before you interview, it's going to be equally important to know yourself. So make sure you do that self-assessment to help you confidently sell yourself in the interview. That being said, take a look at all of your experiences. It could be, with your current or previous job you've held, maybe student organizations or clubs that you're involved in on campus, or maybe your experience as an athlete, right? And figure out from that what your skills are, where you have strengths, what you're not so great at, and what's important to you. One of the common questions asked during interviews is, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And, I've had some candidates tell me that they don't know what their weaknesses are. At the end of the day, we all know that no one's perfect. So, be honest with yourself in the interview, right? Identify those weaknesses beforehand, and be prepared to talk about them, and also share the action steps that you're taking to turn those weaknesses into strengths. Spending some time doing research on yourself is also going to be really important in a behavioral interview setting, which is something that we're also going to talk about more later on. It's also important to really sit down and give some thought to what your goals are in a career, and to remember to focus on those goals as you consider the job description to make sure that they're aligned. Another common question that's asked in an interview is, what are your 2-year goals, or what are your 5-year goals? And, there are times where candidates don't know where they want to be in 2 to 5 years and really get stumped on that question. At Enterprise, we're looking to hire management trainees to become future branch managers. So, if candidates don't know what direction they want to go in, it makes me question whether or not they're going to be a good match for the role. At the end of the day, hiring managers want to make sure that your goals align with the long-term growth of the company. So that's why it's really important to know those goals beforehand and share them during the interview. Also, what transferable skills are listed on your resume? Some of you might not have real world work experience, and that's totally fine. If you were part of a student organization, if you were an athlete, if you ever led a group during a class project, you would have gained skills from those experiences that I think could align well, in a professional role. So now I want to talk a little bit more about, virtual interviews. As I mentioned earlier, you want to treat it as if it were an in-person interview, and again, have that professional image. A lot of the times people are going to tell you to dress the part from the top up, but my recommendation is to get fully dressed, because it's really going to get you in that right frame of mind and help you, feel more confident and more prepared. You also want to test your virtual platform ahead of time, right? So log in at least 5 to 10 minutes before the interview to make sure that your camera and audio are working okay and that you have a good connection. There have been times where candidates have encountered technical difficulties at the start of the interview, and that's really not a great way to kick things off. So really make sure that you give yourself an extra few minutes to make sure that everything's working just fine. And lastly, you want to make sure you're in an acceptable interview environment so you can really make that great impression right from the start. If you don't have a home office, that's totally fine. Any space in your household can work as long as it's quiet, you're using a neutral background, has good lighting, and it's free of distractions, and most importantly, that it's clean. I've done a ton of virtual interviews. And there have been times where I'd see an unmade bed in the background, laundry piled up in the room, dirty dishes in the sink. There have also been times where candidates have done interviews in their car, which is really not a good environment to be in, because at the end of the day, you don't want whatever's in your background to distract the interviewer and take away from what you're saying. So now that you have a better idea as to what goes into preparing for the interview, we talked about looking the part, doing that self-assessment to determine your goals, also researching the companies that mirror your interests. I wanted to share some, other interview best practices. Again, I can't stress enough the dress for success piece. You also want to be conscientious of your nonverbal and verbal communication. Make sure that you have good posture, maintain eye contact throughout the interview, and also be aware of your gestures, right? For example, folding your arms might suggest a closed or defensive attitude, or playing with your hair might convey nervousness, and I think that's also unprofessional. At the end of the day, right, you might be saying one thing and your nonverbal communication might be saying something else. We tend to believe those nonverbal messages. So just be mindful of that. And as you present your ideas, formulate your answers using appropriate grammar and vocabulary, and always remain positive. You don't want to say negative things about former colleagues, former managers, or, the companies that you've worked for. You also want to have a plethora of examples prepared ahead of time. This goes back to knowing yourself and knowing the company, right? When you think back to the job description and, the company you want to work for is looking for someone who has leadership, you should be prepared to share how you've demonstrated leadership in your previous experience. If they're looking for someone who's results driven, be prepared to share examples of a time where you exceeded sales goals or, completed a task way before the deadline. Also be prepared for the tough questions. You might be asked to give an example of a time where you set a goal that you weren't able to reach. We all know that everyone has failed to meet a goal at some point. So be sure to share, one of those situations. Make sure to put a positive spin on it, by sharing what you've learned and what you did differently the second time around, to get results. And that's going to show that you're persistent and, that you don't want to give up. And then when an interview starts, the first question that's always asked by recruiters and hiring managers is, the tell me about yourself question. And most of the time, candidates, will respond by just regurgitating what's on their resume, or other times they might, start sharing personal information with me. Don't make the mistake of doing that. You don't need to share that personal information, such as where you're from, where you went to high school, what your marital status is, or whether or not you have kids, because none of that's relevant to the job. And we've already, reviewed your resume before the interview. What we're really looking for, and what we want to hear is we want to hear about your qualifications, your experiences, and why you're a good fit for the role. It's really your professional story that you're telling, and it needs to be engaging, compelling, and concise. So when you're telling your professional story, you'll want to use what's called the elevator pitch. And I'm sure most of you know what that is by now. But for those of you that don't, the idea behind the elevator pitch is that, if you were at your dream company and the hiring manager walks into the elevator with you, you have from the time the door closes to when you reach the next floor to introduce yourself. So the 4 points you'll need to cover during an elevator pitch is, who are you? What have you done? So what experiences or what specific contributions have you made in your previous experiences? You want to talk about what you have to offer and what makes you an excellent candidate for the position you're interested in. And it should be just 30 to 45 seconds. And I'll give you an example of an elevator pitch for an interview. Hi, I'm Stacey Caceres, senior here at UC Santa Cruz, and will be graduating in June 2021 with a degree in psychology. I have 2 years of experience in customer service and sales from working at Nordstrom. I consistently exceeded monthly sales goals, which led to a promotion to assistant manager within 6 months of working for the company. I really enjoy helping customers and training new employees, so I'd like to pursue a career in management after graduation. In doing research on the company and learning more about the opportunities for advancement at enterprise, I feel that your management trainee position aligns best with my career goals. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to interview with you today. So this example really covers all the key points I just talked about, provides a quick breakdown of who I am, what I've accomplished, and how the skills gained from my work experience can make me a great candidate for that management trainee role. When I interview candidates and they start their interview off with their elevator pitch, I get excited to learn more about their experience and what they're going to bring to the table. And it truly sets a tone for the interview. So if you currently don't have an elevator pitch, I recommend putting one together and taking the time to practice it so that you can really stand out and make that great impression with the hiring managers. And not only is that elevator pitch going to help you stand out in interviews, you should also be using the elevator pitch in career fairs, networking events, or if you're requesting an informational interview with, a hiring manager or recruiter on LinkedIn. And I will tell you, one of the biggest pet peeves as a recruiter when we attend career fairs is when candidates come up to us and say, what company or what does your company do and what positions, do you have available, right? Have that elevator pitch ready. You're going to make a great first impression, and you're also going to be able to control the conversation. So after you've crafted your elevator pitch, you want to make sure that you're prepared to answer interview questions. A lot of companies now are using what's called the behavioral interviewing technique. So you should expect these types of questions and be prepared with how to answer them. Because it's such a common interview technique, I want to spend some time covering it with you all today. So the definition of behavioral interviewing is that it's a systematic approach to generate responses in order to rate job-related skills. The candidates asked to provide examples from their past, showing a specific time when the skill was used. So the theory behind behavioral interviewing is that past or present behavior is going to be a good indicator of future behavior. It's believed that a person's job habits are pretty consistent and that these patterns of behavior are going to predict a person's future actions in a similar job situation. So when an interviewer formulates behavioral interview questions, they're going to look at the job and identify competencies that are necessary to carry out the role. Some examples of performance-related competencies are, leadership, customer service, teamwork, communication, work ethic, the list goes on. Here at Enterprise, our employees are, working on the front lines, driving customer service and sales. So, my candidates have to be able to talk about their experience in dealing with difficult customers. So, an example of a behavioral interview question in customer service could be, tell me about a time where you dealt with an upset customer. Right? And the way you'll want to answer that question, and a good way to answer that question is by using the STAR method. So the STAR method stands for situation, task, action, and result. So the first thing you want to do to respond is describe the situation, right? So the situation was that the customer was upset because of X. The task at hand was that I had to satisfy the customer. What action steps did you take? I did XYZ to resolve the issue, right? And the end result was that the customer left completely satisfied and they ended up coming back to do business with us again. So that's an example of how to respond using the STAR method. Not only is the STAR method going to help you answer interview questions in a more structured manner, it's also an effective way to show the interviewer that, you have the skills for the job and that you also have the results to prove it. You also want to use examples from previous experiences that relate to the question. If you're asked to give an example of a time where you demonstrated leadership but don't have managerial experience, talk about a time where you led a group during a class project, or a time where you led a volunteer event. A lot of skills gained from those experiences are going to be able to translate well into the roles that you're applying to. You also want to keep in mind what the hiring manager is looking for, and again, that goes back to doing your research. Lastly, I want to talk about the close. So all recruiters are going to give you the opportunity to ask questions at the end of an interview. You've already tackled the first step, which is, demonstrating your qualifications. So now you need to make sure that you're prepared with thoughtful questions about the company and the position, because that's going to, reaffirm your interest in the role. You also want to use your research and interview preparation to really build that strong close, so that you can set yourself apart from the other candidates and really, leave that lasting impression. I think it would be good to highlight one or two skills or experiences that are tied to the job description, to reiterate that you're the best match for the role. And that close is really going to show that you want to add value to the company and make a positive impact. It's also good to ask for the next steps in the interview process if it wasn't covered with you. And then lastly, it's always a good idea to send a follow-up thank you email within 24 hours of the interview. I'd say to keep it short and simple, maybe 3 to 4 sentences, and to really personalize it by referencing something specific that was discussed during the interview. Or you can use that as an opportunity to highlight another one of your skills or experiences that would make you the best candidate for the role. So those are my tips and tricks on, successful interviewing to help you, hopefully land your dream job. I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit more about our organization and what we do and the opportunities that we have available. And I'll just quickly go through that with you before we go through the Q&A section. So Enterprise Holdings is the parent company of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, National Car Rental, and Alamo Rent-A-Car. We're family owned and operated. We've been ranked by Forbes as one of America's largest private companies. We operate the largest fleet of passenger vehicles in the world with over 1.7 million vehicles in our fleet. We're the largest buyer and seller of vehicles. Our fiscal year 2019 was 26 billion in revenue. We're the largest recruiters of college graduates in the United States. We have more than 10,000 locations across the US and 80,000 team members. And I like to say we're the Starbucks of rental car companies. We've also earned a reputation as a great place to work. We offer an attractive mix of hands-on training, opportunities for advancement, and a strong values-based culture. We've been recognized for, our senior leaders, our employment opportunities, our training and development, and we're also a military-friendly employer. One of the positions that we are currently hiring for is our management trainee position. This is a full-time opportunity. We do require a bachelor's degree for this role, and the position is open to all majors. It's an entry-level opportunity where one can come in and really learn how to run a business from the ground up. So as a management trainee, you're going to be working at a rental branch with a team. You have the position is highly emphasized on driving customer service and sales, but in addition to that, you're going to be exposed to all the other aspects of our business. So you're going to be able to go out marketing and be able to learn how to cultivate relationships with our accounts, which include body shops, dealerships, insurance companies, corporate businesses. We're going to teach you how to analyze a profit and loss statement to improve performance and profitability. We're going to teach you, how to effectively train and develop employees. We're going to teach you operations, fleet management, and most importantly, we're going to groom you to be an entrepreneur. Our company is unique in that, we strictly promote from within. In addition to the management trainee position that we have open right now, we also are looking for a management trainee summer interns. So if you're going to be going into your senior year in the fall and are really interested in gaining business experience, we're hiring for a management trainee summer internship position. It's full-time for the summer and it's paid. Your responsibilities as an intern are going to mirror that of the management trainee. So you are also going to get exposure to all the aspects of the business that I just talked about. In addition to that, you're going to gain marketable skills that are going to prepare you for a successful career after graduation, hopefully with Enterprise. You're going to be able to participate in contests and in competitions with other interns. It's a fun environment. We provide you with sales goals that you have to hit. And we also have our interns put together a business plan for the summer because we really want them to make an impact on the business while they're with us. And they're truly an integral part of the team. And lastly, I just wanted to show you what the career path looks like at Enterprise. The one position that we hire for that offers that career path is that management trainee position. So everyone in our company has started in that role and has worked their way up. So as a management trainee, you're typically in the role for, anywhere from 8 to 12 months. From there, you can transition to an assistant manager position, and that can happen anywhere from, 9 months to, a little over a year in your career at Enterprise. From assistant manager, you can then become a branch manager, which typically happens around the 2 to 2.5 year mark. As a branch manager, you're overseeing a multi-million-dollar operation. You have an increased responsibility in training and development, and you spend a lot more time in the marketplace trying to grow your business. From branch manager, you can continue on to area manager and onwards and upwards to, vice president or general manager. But the other great thing about our company is that you have the ability to branch off. We have so many other different divisions and departments available. So if at some point in your career you want to transition into HR, risk management, or if you want to, focus more on business to business sales and be an account manager or account executive, right? You'll have the ability to change careers without changing companies. And that's one of the things I love about working at Enterprise is, the opportunities for advancement. So that's all I got for you today. If you would like to learn more about our opportunities, please scan the QR code on the left. I'd be more than happy to send you information. Or if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, please scan the QR code on the right. If you need any advice when it comes to interviewing or resumes, I'd be more than happy to help. And so, at this point, I can go ahead and open it up to any questions that anyone might have.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was muted, but yeah, we can go into the Q&A section and I can answer. We already have a couple of questions that are queued up. But if anybody sees any questions that they really want answered, you can also upvote them so that we know to answer them and we can get to them as soon as possible. But for the first couple questions, they came during your presentation. And the first one is, should we or shouldn't we ask about what the company does at internship fairs? Because I think there was a point where you recommended not asking necessarily.
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're going to be attending a career fair, you should already know what companies are going to be there because it's listed on Handshake. So my recommendation would be to research all the companies that are there. Maybe pick 4 or 5 companies that are of interest to you and align with your career goals, and really do your research on those companies beforehand so that when you have that one-on-one session with the recruiter, right, you're not spending that first 5 minutes learning about the company. You're spending that 5 minutes, talking about your elevator pitch, talking about how your skills and experiences, are going to align well with the opportunity and that you're going to be a great candidate for the role. So that's what you should spend most of your time doing when you meet with a recruiter at the virtual career fair. So yeah, doing that research beforehand, I can't stress enough how important that is.
Yeah, I know also at the Career Center, instead of, we've recommended in the past, instead of asking about what the company does, asking what projects the company might be working on right now, something that they're currently working on, but, not necessarily obvious,
right,
and just like what they do.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So our next question is, what kinds of questions should we not ask at the close of an interview?
That's a great question. I think one of the questions, from my seat, right, if I have a candidate ask me, how did I do during the interview? I wouldn't recommend asking that question because, I think you're trapping the interviewer and forcing them to provide you with, feedback when they really haven't had the time to digest it. So that's one of the top questions that I would refrain from asking.
Okay, awesome. All right, we have another question. Do you conduct criminal background checks in your hiring process?
We do.
Okay, all right. Then our next question, when should we ask about the salary if it's not posted on the job listing? Should we ask during the fair or during the interview?
I'll speak from my experience. Our salary is listed on the posting. For candidates who are interviewing with companies, where they don't know the salary, I probably wouldn't ask during like that first round of interviews. Um, I would say maybe that second round, it would be okay to ask. Um, I don't know if there's anything you can add to that. It's just for us, we're very transparent with our compensation. So I don't know if there's anything that you recommend or you might want to add. But I would say maybe not the first interview. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah. No, I think more of the same. I guess if it's in a fair kind of environment and you're not directly interviewing for a position, you can ask about kind of what the starting salaries are maybe at their company. And they might be able to give you some figures about kind of what to expect. But yeah, I think at least with the majority of the postings I've seen, people are pretty upfront also about posting job salaries. All right, so our next question is, how important is LinkedIn?
I think it's really important to have a LinkedIn profile. Um, it's a lot of recruiters now are using that as a way to, find candidates. So if you are going to be seeking career opportunities, and you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I definitely recommend getting one set up. And there's like a guide for you to, on the LinkedIn site to help you like spruce up your profile. So it's pretty intuitive. It's really easy to use. And I know that's a site that a lot of recruiters are using nowadays.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, for anybody interested, the Career Center is hosting a LinkedIn webinar, kind of introductory video, or yeah, it's going to be a webinar, but it's going to be an introduction to LinkedIn and the importance of it. And that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll have the information posted right when we kind of close. I have a couple of events coming up that are a bit relevant, but
And
yes, definitely LinkedIn is important.
the other thing I wanted to add with LinkedIn is, a lot of jobs that are attained nowadays are through networking, right? So, if you're going to be doing your job search, I think it's important to have that profile so that you could connect with, hiring managers or recruiters out there so that you could learn more about companies, and be able to expand that network so that you have more opportunities available to you.
Yeah, definitely. I know oftentimes, because we at UCSC have Handshake, which is kind of similar to LinkedIn in a couple of ways, where you can have your own profile, but you can also, there are job postings on Handshake and stuff. But one thing a lot of our students do is they check out the website and then they can check out on LinkedIn to see if there might be somebody that they know or somebody who went to UCSC, for example, that they can try to get connected to learn more about the company before applying and interviewing. Okay, so moving on to the next question. What makes an applicant stand out in an interview?
That's a great question. So, first off, I think it's really having that elevator pitch to kick things off. As I mentioned earlier, that's really going to set the tone. Someone who's confident and someone who, is able to, respond to a lot of those interview questions, using the STAR method, right? Being prepared ahead of time, using the STAR method to respond to all the questions, really shows that you're results driven, right? And then, in the end, making sure that, you ask thoughtful questions, right? To, reiterate your interest in the role. Those are things that are really going to set you apart, right? And also demonstrating that level of enthusiasm throughout the interview is really important too.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, so our next question is, how many rounds of interviews are there usually? And I think this might be a bit more targeted towards enterprise specifically. So yeah.
That's a great question. So it's a 3-step interview process. The first interview will be with a talent acquisition professional like myself. If you pass the first round of interviews, then the second interview would be with an area manager and branch manager. And then if you pass that second round of interviews, then you're, invited to go through like an in-person branch observation, so that you can, get a better feel for the team culture, gain more insight as to what the day-to-day responsibilities would be like and what the sales expectations are. And then if all that goes well, then there's obviously the background check and things like that. But right now we are doing conducting the interviews, the first and second interviews virtually. The only time you'd ever have to go in person is if you were invited to do the branch observation. And this applies to the full-time management trainee and internship opportunity.
Okay, awesome. And kind of similar or related to what you just discussed, there was a follow-up question on, does your company hire non-violent, non-sex offender, and non-turpitude ex-felons?
Well, we consider, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no. The question is, does your company hire non-violent, non-sex offenders, and non-turpitude ex-felons?
Right. We are an equal opportunity employer, right? And so those are not type of those, we don't determine those types of things during the interview process. If something like that were to come up, during a background check, right? If we were to move someone on to that stage in the interview process, and we see something of that nature, like we also always look at those situations on a case-by-case basis. Right.
Okay, awesome. All right. Our next question is related to the previous LinkedIn question that we had. What are some websites or resources that we can use to find career opportunities?
There's obviously LinkedIn. Handshake is a great resource. I know that a lot of companies out there are posting their positions on the Handshake website. There's Indeed, there's Glassdoor. There's a ton out there, but those are the most common that I've seen. I don't know if there's any others that you can add, McKenna.
I think the UCSC careers website has a couple of resources on there, but Handshake is definitely one of the resources that we recommend using the most besides LinkedIn, because you have job postings that are listed on the website, and our career center actually vets through the job postings that are listed, at least affiliated with the UC campus. So, we really try to filter out as many of these, more kind of dubious companies that might try to have postings on there. But it has all of our events, all of events that not necessarily we're hosting, but our students are invited to, fairs, everything. So definitely recommend Handshake and LinkedIn as well.
And just to add to that, I think it's it's equally as important to spruce up your Handshake profile also, because recruiters are on there looking for potential leads as well. So
yes. Okay. Next we have, if we're giving an example following STAR, how long should the response be?
Oh, you froze up for a second there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I don't know if it's my connection or it might be my connection.
That's okay. Honestly, who knows? Sometimes it can be, it's up in the air. But if we are giving an example following STAR, how long should the response be?
I guess it really depends on the question, right? If they are asking a question on, a specific project and you have a lot of details to cover, that might end up being, a 5-minute response, right? Some responses might be 2 minutes, right? It really all depends on the question. But I think as long as you're covering all key points in the STAR method, that's going to help you structure your answer and not make it sound like you're rambling, if that's what you're worried about. And so as long as you cover all key points, no matter how long it takes, I think you're good. And I think if it gets to a point where the interviewer, notices that you're rambling or talking too much, they'll usually kind of stop you in your tracks, right? And so there's no like specific time frame that's like the sweet spot.
Yeah, just remaining concise
Mhm.
and as on point and relevant to the question as
Correct.
possible. All right, our next question comes from Sarah, who asks, how should we ask about the salary? Is there a way to phrase it that is more polite or also impolite?
I don't know if I have the best response for that, just because, we're very transparent with our compensation. I don't know if, you might want to answer that question, McKenna.
Yeah, I think more so just kind of stating, I guess, going right off the bat and saying, like, asking about how much they're paying at their company is not the best way to do it. It's kind of more of the questions that you ask after you find out more about the expectations and the responsibilities of the job. So that's kind of more leaning towards how you would potentially impolitely ask the question. But I think in terms of making it as polite as possible, you know, just simply asking, so with these responsibilities that this job has, what is the starting salary for this position? You know, just making it simple, straight to the point, but also respectful,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
Uh,
does.
yeah. All right. Well, our next question is, if you are bilingual and it's on your resume, would an interviewer want a certification or proof of biliteracy?
Ooh, I think it really all depends on the job, right? If the position
Yeah.
requires you to speak a certain language, maybe they might require that. But if it's something that you have and the position doesn't require it, I don't see the company asking for that type of documentation. I don't know if you would agree with that, or if there's anything else
Yeah.
you would add.
Yeah, for the most part, I don't see, unless it's absolutely required for the position, I don't see any place directly asking for a certification or proof of biliteracy. Um, and personally, if it's the case where maybe you studied your second language in college, you can have proof of the courses you have taken. But for the most part, maybe if it is more important to the job, but not requiring a certification, they might have somebody who speaks the same language that you also speak secondarily to have a conversation with you to just make sure you can actually speak the language. But
Mhm.
yeah, in terms of certification or proof, I haven't seen that a lot in my
I haven't
experience.
either.
Yeah. Okay. Our next question is, as a future graduate, how likely is it for companies to hire graduates with no background experience in the company or relating to the company?
Um, I guess I can mainly speak for our organization. Um, the position that we're hiring for is entry level, right? And it's nice to have, since we are a retail business, and we're providing that service to customers. It's nice to have like some sort of a customer service background. But if you don't and you're really interested in the opportunity with us, like if you can think of experiences you've had from, maybe volunteering that you did, or if you were an athlete, or if you were involved in any clubs or organizations, right? Putting those experiences on your resume, like with no prior work experience, I think would still be able to get you an interview, right? Um, if you're looking to work for a company that, requires, you know, maybe skills that you don't have, maybe take the time to really develop those skills, right after graduation, so that you can, add it to your resume, right? And so when you do have a little bit more of that experience, maybe it's 6 months after graduation, maybe it's a year, right? You're going to be more likely, you'll have better chances of getting contacted. But again, it really depends on the company.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think also one thing I notice of a lot of people my age is that we have a tendency to kind of underestimate what applicable experience we have to stuff. So
Right.
you already mentioned volunteering. And I know that in the case of, engineering students, for example, if they might not have had internship opportunities, they can also talk about projects that they've worked on with clubs or stuff that is relevant to what the company does and does speak to their experiences. So I think it's not too far to say that you can be kind of creative with how you interpret your experiences and what you've done in the past.
Correct.
And how it can apply to other positions.
Right.
All right, so sorry, we're gonna start to wrap it up. I know we're on a time limit. We can go beyond it a little bit, but just to get these last couple of questions answered.
Sure.
Would having a virtual background work as a neutral background, or is that not preferred in an interview?
Virtual background is totally okay as long as it's, professional. I did forget to mention that, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, we both
Yep, we both
have our virtual background. Yeah, and actually, UCSC has a bunch of free Zoom backgrounds if you guys haven't already checked that out. So definitely represent.
We have
Okay.
a ton of, UCSC alum on our team that, I forgot to mention this earlier, that, have been really successful at enterprise. So again, if you're interested in opportunities with us, I did put a link in the chat box to register. So please do that. So I can send you a little bit more information. And if you want the deck of slides today to use as reference, for when you start interviewing and applying to jobs, I can also send that to you as well if you register.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. All right, so it looks like we have our last two questions that we'll try to answer quickly. The first one is, would we approach talking to a recruiter at a job fair the same as how we would approach a recruiter during an interview?
I talked about the elevator pitch earlier. You might have to tweak a little bit. If it's for a career fair, right? But for the most part, it would be similar, right? And the elevator pitch example I shared earlier, I ended it by saying, I'm really excited to be here today to, interview with you for this opportunity at a career fair. You can say, after you talk about your experiences and, who you are, you can say, you know what, I'm really, I did research on the positions that you have open, and I'm really excited to learn more. Right. So just tweaking, those last two sentences, but for the most part, it can stay the same.
Yeah, I think definitely the point of the job fair, at least when we were in person, it could be kind of hard because depending on how many students were there, you want to be concise and not take up a huge amount of the recruiter's time, but also making sure to stand out. It's kind of the balance between the two.
And you only have 10 minutes, right? On the virtual recruiters, so you want to make the most out of those 10 minutes that you have.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the benefit of having our fairs virtually, at least right now, is that you can select and reserve set time frames with the recruiters, whereas in previous job fairs it was just kind of, you had to wait in a line just to be able to speak with them. So you don't have to do that anymore.
Right, which is nice. And you can do it at the comfort of your own home.
Yeah. Okay, so our last question for tonight, how can you best put some of those skills and experiences on your resume when you're transitioning between roles? Or how can you use volunteer/coursework experience as experience?
That's a great question. So when you're crafting your resume and you want to put volunteer experience on there, in those bullets, I think a great way to kind of show that you're results driven and you have the skills is to also use that STAR method. When you're as your bullets on your resume, right? So start if you led a volunteer event, right? You can say, led a volunteer event, which consisted of, 250 people, and, this resulted in XYZ, right? Starting that bullet with a strong action verb, and then, going on from there, and then ending it with a result, and quantify as much as possible. So also use that STAR method when putting experience, listing all the experience and bullets on your resume.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, exactly that. I can't emphasize that enough. I also know a lot of students tend to use they have a set list of skills. So you can list their, if there is relevant coursework specifically, that might also just be beneficial enough to put on its own. But if it's a specific skill that is important and relevant to this job, you can list it there and then just have kind of a blip about how you have that experience and how you got it.
Absolutely. Right. I would highly, make sure that you don't just list what, if you're going to list your previous work experience on your resume, don't just list your duties and responsibilities, because for the most part, we know what responsibilities are associated with your job titles. So, list as many accomplishments and achievements as possible, and then structure it using that STAR method. And again, if you want someone to review your resume or, critique it for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'm more than willing to have that second set of eyes on it as well. And I know the Career Center is great with that also.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the Career Center also has, we have peer advisors, and we also have career coaches who can look at any of your resumes or any of your cover letters. If you guys want to learn more, you can look at the Career Center's website, definitely. But yeah, as we kind of close it up, I'll just really quick share my screen and just say thank you all so much for joining us today. Once you close out of the webinar, a survey will pop up. So if you could fill that out, that would be great. It helps make events like this great, not only as we kind of have more, but it makes it great for you guys, for us, and for students in the future. And these are just also a couple of events I mentioned before. The LinkedIn workshop that will be on April 20th at 4 o'clock. So if you aren't as experienced with LinkedIn, that would be a great workshop to check out. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in any of these fairs, you can find out more on the Career Center's website, careers.ucsc.edu, or check us out on Handshake. But with that, just a big thank you to Stacey for joining us today and presenting.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This video will be uploaded shortly again to our YouTube page. So if you want to check it out, come back to it. You'll all be notified if you've registered for the event that it's been posted. But with that, thank you so much again for joining us. And I hope you all have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.